For a long time, it was common for great RPGs to release in Japan, and then never see an international release. Though fan translations and official re-releases generations later have alleviated these issues. Sometimes it feels like the last few years have been a golden age of re-releases finally breaking through internationally. We've had Trials of Mana twice, and Live Alive, and these would have been unthinkable predictions years ago. But things like this aren't anything new. We saw the Super Famicom Dragon Quest games finally make it to the DS, and later even mobile phones, as well as having multiple re-releases of the Final Fantasies that initially weren't available in the West. Anyway, I couldn't think of a smooth transition, so Star Ocean. This 1996 Super Famicom RPG has some of the most beautiful graphics on that system, and it was one of many games stuck in Japan for the longest time. This was a technical marvel, and unfortunately it doesn't really get the recognition it deserves over here. This game was visually miles ahead of anything else on the Super Famicom, and it had voice acting as well. Oh, and the game itself was fine too. That's an understatement. It is still a great game, and it has a story and setting that puts it at the top of the Super Famicom RPGs. Despite everything I will say about the PSP version that this video was ultimately about, there's a charm of the original that is unmatched, and just seeing this system do things it shouldn't do gives it a leg up in some regards. Though to go back to the 90s, this game was a Japan exclusive on a system that was already on its way out. By the time this game came out, the N64 was already out. So while these graphics are very advanced, they weren't pushing the limits as much as people would expect. But around the same time, we saw the PlayStation 1 release more RPGs in North America and sometimes even PAL territories. It was starting to become a mainstream genre, plus producing CDs was a lot cheaper, so why not release as much as you could. Star Ocean's second story, which was called Star Ocean: The Second Story, finally introduced this nice sci-fi and fantasy universe to audiences everywhere in 1998, 1999, and 2000 based on your region. It did the best thing the PlayStation 1 could do, and it gave us phenomenal sprite work and pre-rendered backgrounds to walk all over, as well as giving us these big 3D expanses with really chunky polygons. It aligns perfectly with my tastes, and from my point of view, it is one of the most visually impressive games of that era. I don't need a remake. Anyway, that's not the game I'm talking about. Yet. Now to get back on topic, the first game was given a full remake, for a system that got every remake in the 2000s. And I don't mean the GBA, I'm talking about the PSP. This 2007 gem wasn't just a basic conversion of the original with new graphics, nor was it an unrecognizable game that carried over nothing of the past. Instead, this is built on a modified version of the engine from the second Star Ocean. So it feels like an alternate universe PlayStation remake of the original. It's a nice outlier, as the late 2000s was this era of reveling in nostalgic throwbacks to 8-bit games. And while I doubt it was the intention, and this was just done because the engine worked and they were also porting the second game to PSP 2, in some ways this feels like a really early example of mid to late 90s nostalgia pandering, and I'm all here for it. Even if I know deep down that movement speed like this on a foggy map isn't anything close to ideal. It is frankly a drag to traverse here, and as much as I enjoy this game, the version that I played because I'm a weirdo is not the version I would recommend to people. This is something that at times did require something like a podcast or a YouTube video just to make it more enjoyable. You see, the PlayStation 4 and the Switch both got an enhanced remake of this remake, and the main change is that you can actually move at an acceptable pace, thanks to a speed up feature. So that is probably the definitive version of this game, unless you are just like me and you love UMDs taking up space in your home. But just to get it over and done with, The enhanced version on the newer systems also includes other bonuses like Japanese audio as an option, newer character art more reminiscent of a Super Famicom look, though personally I find it clashes a bit with the sprite work, which was specifically made for the PSP still. And I do love the sprite work here, even though Ilya often reminded me of the male protagonist from Sword of Mana. Anyway, I've covered the game's past and the future now, so let's look at the PSP version exclusively from here on out, and no other versions. Buckle up, because this game's opening goes a mile a minute, even if running on the map is so slow. In the year 2432, humans are a spacefaring species, but none of this is known to the trio of Millie, Dawn, and the main boy Roddick. They are 3 eager youth, and they make up the village's defense force. This village is on the entire world these 3 know about, and it is planet Rogue, an Earth-like planet with less advanced technology and science, but with a greater knowledge of the mystical. These Rogians are extremely similar looking to humans, but with pointier, taller ears, and they have furry tails. Despite the boring humdrum of their routine, they discover an illness that is starting to infect everyone, including the third wheel of this group, Dawn. This will turn everyone to stone permanently. This trio start looking for some flowers that they believe will be able to cure everyone, but they are suddenly intercepted by strange beings who teleport in and say they're from another world in the stars. This new duo of Ronix and Ilya are actually humans from Earth. And because this is an optimistic, classic Star Trek view of the future, they follow strict rules that prohibit them from interfering with planets they consider less developed. No awful space colonizing here, like what will probably happen if we ever make it to the stars. But because of the space rules, our heroes are given a tough decision. Either go with the humans and maybe find a cure for this disease, but never be allowed to return to their planet because they'd know too much about other worlds and space travel, or they can stay here and be left on a dying planet, but at least not have to say goodbye to everyone and everything they've ever known. They pick the humans so they can save everyone, but now they have to process never seeing this world again. And this would be believable if us the player didn't have a helpful minimap already showing this entire planet's continents, most of which we haven't seen yet. It's obvious we'll come back, but it may not be in the way players would expect. While on the spaceship, the humans begin their medical tests on Dawn since he's already infected. Unfortunately, while they can study it, the group learn there is no known cure, but fortunately the disease itself originates from planet Rogue. But unfortunately, it is from the Demon King who was defeated hundreds of years earlier. So to create a vaccine, we switch to a time travel story, where the group go back in time and explore planet Rogue. Now everyone is a fish out of water. Our Rogians are native to this world but not the time period, and the humans are super out of their comfort zone. There's a lot more I glossed over, like the fact that the humans are having another war for different species, or the fact that Dawn is in love with Millie. Let's just say the story goes lightning fast here because this is all the prologue. Things slow down as you'd expect, which gives us more time to live in this world and get to know the many characters who could potentially be party members. But you can only get some of them in a single playthrough. This is very much the kind of game that expected replays so you could get different guys, like this werewolf guy, or this winged guy, or this sword guy who becomes outclassed quickly. In fact, this PSP version, and the subsequent releases of it, added 2 extra recruitable characters not seen in the Super Famicom original. It is a great incentive to replay, and this is something the sequel doubled down on. Once we go back in time, we only get to control Roddick and Ilya, who are separated from the other half due to entering the time vortex slightly later than the others. It's a great way to show Ilya, one of the 2 humans we haven't seen much of prior to this, and it helps give us a beginning goal outside the larger overall one of saving everyone. At At the beginning, this is kind of a road trip for this unlikely pair from different planets, as they want to reunite with the people they're close to. En route, we get to see many towns, and even more people with their own struggles. This world really immerses you, and it makes you fall in love with this lovable cast of characters. This feels like an actual place, and not just a linear set of towns we go to in order, since there will be a lot of backtracking all over the place. Sure, it's not the most fun or convenient way to stretch out the game, but it means all the continents and towns stay relevant over the entire game, and our mission to save everyone really feels like a mission to save everyone. It's made less painful anyway, thanks to a lot of the towns being coastal, and there are docks that you can use to fast travel from one to another. It all really shined to deliver a memorable world that I'll never forget. And the plot, while it is slower at times, never slows down. There is always more thrown at you that will keep you engrossed. The writing of this game is a step above games from the original era of the Super Famicom, and honestly, even by the time the PSP was kicking, this was still a step above most games in that department. It's just a shame that for me personally, the gameplay rarely met those highs. I already mentioned movement being a drag, and it isn't really helped by the high encounter rate, and we don't even get repel-like items. But there are ways to circumvent the encounter rate, thanks to the skills system, which I'll get more into later, but for a lot of players they'd be unaware that there's even a way to fix this. And frankly, it shouldn't be on the players to have to fix this encounter rate. It is unbelievable. So battles start all the time, and they're easier to just battle than to run away, and thanks to that, the game snowballs into becoming even easier. The battles are, during most of the game, the kind you can turn your brain off for. Your buddies can do automatic actions based on how you set their behaviour, and you can just mash buttons and win with whatever character you want. It's just a shame, because there are moments where things really do come alive, like the Colosseum where we do one-on-one battles with limited healing, and this means we have to do strategies and actually move our character away to prevent them being hit by an enemy attack. But late game enemies do love to use status afflictions, one of which turns you to stone, so you do have to be vigilant and keep everyone alive. And it's a nice touch that enemies start using their stone ailment more often as you get closer to the Demon King, since he's the one apparently responsible for this condition. It's a nice way to tie gameplay back into the overarching story, though the battles are often let down in one extra department. These characters are fully voiced and they love talking during these battles, so it'll devolve into loud, repeated voice clips. And we have overly long animations for spells, which make these battles become a chore. No wonder people don't like using spellcasters in this game. At least, the game does pause when you open up menus to switch characters, or use an item, or use some kind of specific spell or something. And this is something that rarely has to get done anyway, because the game lets you quick map attacks to the shoulder buttons to keep up the pace. But if we do use an item, we can't use another one for a few seconds, which helps keep the tension up. It means we can't just spam items. And that's what I mean. The battle system here, in a lot of departments, is nice, and I loved it in the one-on-one combat encounters as I already mentioned. There is a really good basis here. It can be exhilarating. It's just the game didn't live up to this potential. Most of the game expects nothing from you. Combat is usually very easy, and you level up incredibly quickly, but at least we can play with the unique stats system that Star Ocean has. This is one of the most interesting things here. We get weird skills like sketching, eye for detail, determination, poker face, and many more. Most of these skills are used for extra, never necessary mechanics, like buying ingredients to cook food to restore party members even though there are other healing items out there, or making items that can be sold for a nice profit even though there's lots of things we can already sell to make a profit. They're just fun bonuses, and I frankly like this kind of stuff. And one of my favourite uses of these weird skills is appraising items, since we sometimes get unusable items with a question mark for a title. but if we can appraise them successfully, we can actually use them, and they're often great equipment. All of this stuff is so unnecessary, but it's this odd, robust system that I love. And for those of you that don't care about extra fluff, you can easily ignore it. We can instead just focus on the skills that make our stats better or give us more combat options. There are plenty of those as well. The way we level up these skills is a nice little thing to do every level or so, since they cost a different amount of SP depending on how useful the skill is, and the amount increases dramatically for each level of this particular skill. They all start at level 1 and can go up to level 10, meaning there's a lot to keep on top of here. But there's a lot of customizing outside our skills because this game has an options menu, obviously, but there are some nice touches here that I love to see in RPGs. We get pretty extensive button remapping, which is a nice thing to have, but we can also change the colour of the menus, which is a thing I will always praise every time it's here. And here it's not even just as simple as changing a single colour, because we have a whole gradient and we get to change each of the 4 corners. I'm sure most people don't care about that, but I don't care, I do. For all my ragging on the combat and the slow traversal of the game, this game is a real treat in so many ways. While the dub may not be everyone's cup of tea, and this is already fixed in the enhanced version if you want the Japanese audio, getting an RPG with this much dialogue and having it have full English voice acting is impressive, especially for a PSP game from 2008, which didn't belong to one of the super big franchises. Star Ocean wasn't ever a huge mainstream hit in the West, nor was even less so then. Although one slight downside of the voice acting is that characters will never use whatever names that you give for characters. So, Frieza here is always called erotic in audio. You know, that's a small complaint, it's not a big deal. In fact, I really wouldn't expect anything else. But just know that you have to put up with the name erotic. But to get back onto the amount of dialogue, it's so impressive here, especially considering the amount of party combinations we can have. And on top of that, there are things called private actions here, which are times where you can explore a town on your own while your teammates are doing their own thing in town. This gives you an opportunity to just explore and further your relationships with these characters. On top of this being a treat for fans of writing, for people that don't like writing but like RPGs, it also gives you a small gameplay benefit in battle. With the specific party I used in this specific run, I felt truly connected to everyone, especially at the end when I had to say my goodbyes to this group. In saying my goodbye to the game, I feel a similar level of attachment. Look, Star Ocean first departure, often while playing you I was a little bored, mostly because of movement speed and combat stuff I've kept harping on. But I never give up on you, because your writing is that engrossing, and the ability to replay with different party members will bring me back again, even if I'll complain during that run as well. This isn't the ideal RPG, but it's still a sublime RPG that more people need to experience. Star Ocean is a series that unfortunately doesn't carry the weight it should, but hopefully this changes. But one series that carries around a lot of weight is what the next video will be on. Thanks to my weird December tradition, I'll be looking at the PC classic Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game. Everyone already knows what this series is, but I have a weird love of the first game that I just need to let out. It's a game I replay every year or two, and I just need an outlet for it, please.